Business, the construction industry's innovation and technology show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the AEC Business Podcast, the go-to spot for innovation and technology in architecture, engineering and construction. I'm your host, Aarni Heiskanen, and today my guest is Will Synnott, Chief Customer Officer at Disperse, a construction management software company. Hi Will, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me today. Much appreciated.
Yeah. For those watching live, you can post questions and comments on LinkedIn and YouTube if you want. We might be able to discuss some of them during this live broadcast, but we can anyway reply after this session. I'm sure, Will, that's okay with you.
Oh, that'd be brilliant. Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah. Feel free. As many questions as possible. If not, please DM me afterwards.
Yeah. So, Will, tell me briefly about your company and how you got involved.
Yeah, thanks. So I work for Disperse. Disperse is a turnkey site capture and tracking solution designed for large-scale construction projects. A construction technology company based in London, but we have operations across the UK and Ireland, America, and also in the Middle East. We're really trying to working with general contractors, but also with developers as well. I get a lot of fun working on some pretty big projects. My background, I'm a chartered geologist, 14 years of construction experience, previously from the consultancy background. I've worked in London most of my life, a lot of large towers, basement. I've helped design and be part of for the skyline of London. And I got into Disperse primarily because when I was an engineer, as a consultant, I was exploring reality capture and kind of seeing what type of technologies are out there to track and take a snapshot of a progress on site. It was a problem I had and my colleagues, and I investigated it. I found a number of the vendors that most people are probably familiar with in the reality capture world, and then stumbled on Disperse 2 years ago. And here I am now, supporting the business development and marketing and the operations of the project of Disperse. That's probably a good. I think I've narrowed that down to about a minute. I usually drag on a little bit longer.
Okay, no problem. And I noticed that my countryman from Finland is also very much involved. He's actually the CEO.
He is, yeah, Ollie. Yeah, he's doing an absolutely fantastic job. He has actually just recently become the CEO, previously the CEO. He's doing an absolutely great job helping steer us forward and pushing us forward.
Well, let's first talk a little bit about construction as an industry and challenge. It's a complicated and project-oriented industry, as we know. What are the critical challenges in building a new management tool or any tool for it? Yeah,
well, the industry is plagued with issues. I think we all know that. But there's also a lot of light and there's a lot of optimism. I'd almost say probably optimism is probably one of the issues in the industry, that we're too optimistic about a lot of things, and ultimately it comes out and there's a delay. But the industry has some amazing people who are working in it, and ultimately infrastructure that we're using right now and what we're watching has been from the construction industry. And I think a lot of people forget just like how complicated the construction industry is, and just like how it has a massive impact on everyone in the world. And in terms of like the challenges of creating a new management tool, most project sites will have their own management tool, and there'll be a lot of them. And there's no necessarily one size fits all one project, and there's no standard. So Disperse was really trying to like the processes and the ways of works that teams already have in place. We don't want to be too much, we don't want to disrupt that. We want to see how we can really work away a method to help the team and build upon what they've got. Okay. And then that allows them, when they're ready, to then be able to move over and use our work, not use our workflow, but enhance their workflow with the processes that we have at Disperse, because we're essentially vertically automating a large chunk of work that is done right now manually across the site.
Yeah. But you talked about reality capture and how that brought you into your company. So what specific problems does Disperse solve, and how do you do it?
Yeah, so we're helping the project teams on site get a better understanding of what's actually happening in near real time, essentially giving a snapshot of what's happening on that site. Typically, Disperse typically works on very large projects, typically on the range of 100 to 300 million pounds. We've actually got a few that are over $1 billion. So, in terms of the scale of the project and trying to understand exactly what's going on at one given time is incredibly difficult for a project team. And so Disperse is essentially taking a snapshot of what's happening at that given time. And then we're not just providing you with the photos, we're actually then providing you the data, the insights that's behind those photos, and in a format that is much more easier for them to consume. Okay, we're not just throwing numbers at you. We're trying to help guide you to the issues. We're trying to facilitate where the problems are, and so that way you don't get blindsided at a later date.
So you're talking about situational awareness or the situation picture that is in real time.
In near real time, yeah. So most of our projects will be taking like a weekly snapshot. So Disperse, we also, like I mentioned, we do the site capture, so the reality capture element. We have a team, a really dedicated team that will go out and take photos across your entire site. A 360 camera, no bigger than an iPhone, and we'll take hundreds, if not thousands, of these photos. And that really gives us that photo visual twin of that building, okay? But where then the real magic for Disperse do is taking those photos and then understanding and processing the data from it and actually saying, well, what has actually progressed this week? If you're on the 50th floor, has there actually been any work on that floor? And then who by and where and what task and what component? We can really drill down. Essentially, it's no difference to you and me walking around a site one week and then going the next week and looking at it and going, this week the ceiling's on. You noticed it, you picked it up. We're just doing that through 360 photos, which is essentially our app. It's Disperse's eyes in your project.
Well, our episode's title that we advertised is No BIM for Construction Progress Tracking. Maybe that's a little bit provocative, but why not? Why don't you need BIM, and how is it possible?
So building information management, it's essentially where your documentation is stored. The worse it is, the better it is for us in one way, because that's how Disperse really thrives. Like, we like that challenge of being able to ascertain where are the latest drawings, what is the latest set of information you have. And then when it comes to 3D BIM modeling, again, it's not something that we necessarily need at all. We've set our processes up just the way that your team do before 3D BIM models were ever created. So, for an example, if your team, and most projects, the majority of projects are still built off a 2D drawing, still contractual, not all of them, but the majority are, then we can track. So if you can track from a 2D drawing, if you can track from a 2D drawing, we can track from a 2D drawing. And we've set the process up within Disperse to be able to automate that process of tracking all of the works across the entire project. And we also, where we take a little bit step ahead, where we try to provide even more value and try to automate that annoyance that you have to then go check what drawings are the latest. Well, we do that automatically. Most projects will have a really good document control system where they're using AConnect, Procore, ASite, where they've actually got all the documentation. We just become a partner to that. We see the information. If there's an updated drawing that comes out, we will look at that and we will ingest it into our workflow. Just like you do, we're just doing it at a much faster pace, but we're taking that pressure off you. And I think that's the bit which is, we're not trying to be a burden to the team. I'm not asking you to take photos. I'm not asking you to put data into it. I'm just simply giving you the information in a passive form that you can then absorb and then act accordingly.
Yeah, and there's also this challenge with BIM, let's say, models, is that oftentimes they are not quite, let's say, the quality is not as expected. So many times you have discrepancies.
That's right, and I think I do feel that the industry believes that the 3D BIM models are as accurate as anything. You see it on the internet, you see it on LinkedIn, lots of lovely 4D BIM models, but most of those are done pre-construction. They are the best intention. And during construction, when the drawings are then shared and are trying to be updated by the individual trades, that coordination is difficult, and it's also expensive. Now, there are some main contractors out there who are pushing it, and quite rightly so, because it's great to have that record and have that information at hand. But we've just set up a process that you don't have to do that. And if you're not at that stage at the minute, so for example, if you have your digital plan roadmap and BIM 3D is on there in a few years' time, we can still work with you. And in fact, the majority of our clients are on that path, and we will include other elements of 3D BIM within our process if a 3D BIM model is there. We just don't rely upon it because the stats that we have, majority of projects during construction, they're not kept up to date. So and we don't want to give you almost like a false negative of showing you something, and actually that's not what the BIM model says. Your drawing, your photo says this, and the BIM model is not, what's correct. And we've had that situation when we highlight issues, because we also have like an issue detection as well. And that has been problems where we've had to discuss with the clients, like, well, you told us your 3D BIM model was correct, and it's not, evidently. So I'm not trying to put down 3D BIM. I'm just highlighting that there are vendors such as Disperse in the field that can facilitate and help businesses, contractors, and developers move with the times and add on the 3D BIM elements when they're ready to.
Yeah. Well, one thing that is, let's say, more and more common is that we have many apps. We are inundated with apps and data sources on the job site. Although they may replace paper, they still very often require manual input. But how can we start reducing the number of apps instead of stacking up more?
Yeah, it is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, and just the number of apps. Even when I look at my phone, just all the different apps I have to, the different banks, the different travel apps that I have to use. It is frustrating, and I can feel it for contractors and developers having all these different vendors out there to be able to access it. I think ultimately where I find the most pain is contractors when users actually have to input data. And I think those are the apps where, if you're having to do that, it really better be resolving a really large chunk of your process. Okay. It needs to be doing something that's really hitting a nail there, because otherwise I think there's other internal processes that you could look at that really help that. What we're trying to do at Disperse, and which we are doing, is we are essentially automating a whole number of steps of the process. So I mentioned about 360 photos. We do that. We take that entire workflow away from you. We'll set up everything when it comes to the actual, the model, the viewer that we have. So you don't have to do anything other than give us access. And then when it comes to actually tracking the works, you don't have to walk around with a phone, taking photos or tracking the works. We'll do that for you, and we'll also do it at an incredibly granular level. Especially if your 3D BIM model only goes to, say, level 3, like a mid-range, we can still track the skirting board because it's on the drawing and because we were used to tracking skirting boards. So for going back to kind of like the root of the question is, trying to reduce those apps. I think fundamentally that is something that the digital director or the person who's in charge of the innovation really needs to consider. Like, is this adding more steps? Okay. Is it reducing the process? We all have processes, all of us do, okay? And on a construction site, they have lots, but really like trying to understand what is that process of getting the data, collecting it all the way to the end of actually then dealing with it. What is it? And then can we automate it? And Disperse is essentially that large chunk. That's why we're vertically integrated with our tracking, with our photos, tracking, and the reporting.
Mm-hmm. Well, you already mentioned that you're really good at serving large projects, but what types of projects benefit most from your solution, and what kind of results have your clients seen?
So we can work on any type of construction project. Typically right now we're very much heavily invested in residential and commercial. We're actually working on one of Europe's largest urban redevelopments. It's over $1 billion worth of construction works, and that this summer we'll be peaking at like 9 buildings. And again, we're taking the photos, we're tracking the progress, and we're highlighting against their program. And that's a very large residential project. But we've also got some huge commercial projects in London and also in New York. So in terms of like the diversity of the projects, it is essentially anything where there's a photo and there's drawings, we can track it. We've also worked in hospitals. We've done we're actually live on a number of hospitals at the minute in America. But ultimately, anything that you think is, as long as it's a building and there's a roof over their head, we can track it. We could potentially even track infrastructure works. I think we spoke about this before, but at the minute, the pie for working in residential or commercial is still pretty big. Let's solve that problem first before we try to take infrastructure on. That's a whole another beast.
Yeah, so you have different types of projects, but also if your clients are, let's say, in other countries, we know that construction is very much local business, and there are local, say, regulation and the way the businesses work, even though it looks pretty much similar from the outside. But how can you cater to local or company specific needs?
Yes, so internally within Disperse, we have engineers and architects who are efficient, competent at reading drawings. So it is just a case of those terms and conditions. Well, those standards will be on those drawings, but at the same time highlighting, what is the local area that we're working in and addressing those standards. Majority of the time, we're looking at progress of the works. So it's essentially what works are going in. And that isn't relatively that complicated. Essentially, if you can see it and it's on those drawings, our team can pick that up. So being able to be remote and essentially allows us to work on any project anywhere in the world remotely, as long as we can capture those photos. We have essentially made that process a remote functionality.
Well, actually, on your website, you mentioned the name Impulse. So is Impulse the product, or what is? Can you explain a little bit about?
Yeah. So Impulse is our solution of services that we provide at the minute. What Impulse is most known for is its dashboard of being able to visually see the progress data. Now, we track a lot of data throughout all the phases of the construction, both from the ground floor slab at superstructure all the way to final fit out. And Disperse leads that because, again, we don't need that BIM. We can essentially track anything visual. It gives us that ability to work across the project throughout its entirety. And then in terms of Impulse, what we've done with all that data that we have and the insights, we have made it incredibly visual to the team. And I think that's the crux of it is we have the data. We go down to the 5% for essentially every component, but majority of the team, they don't want to look at that. They want to be able to make snap decisions then and there. They want to be able to look at, right, where am I this week? Where was the MEP contractor last week? Brilliant. Pop it up. I can see it across the entire dashboard, which looks like your building because we base it upon your building. We've actually taken that very much from where you have, if any of your listeners are aware, you have your 2D GA drawing on your wall, and you'll be essentially marking up your facades. What works have been done. We've very much copied that to essentially how you visualize. But having that data and that insights like there and then allows the team to very quickly make a quick snapshot decision. Oh, brilliant. There's a spotlight. There's an issue. There's a problem on the 50th floor. Okay, who has been working there? And then we can tell you who's that. So making the data more accessible for the team to be able to make those decisions is what has really ignited the team and where we're seeing huge benefits, and not just from be able to help refute disputes, claims, erroneous claims, which we've saved a lot of money on, but also just making the team just that more lean, understanding, especially if it's a tall tower. Like earlier today, I was walking up, I was doing some filming for one of our projects, and I walked all the way to the 28th floor, and I thought to myself, if I was actually working here, I could check if had anyone actually been here. And that is where those small little increments of ability to be able to save on a massive project, where you will start to have those economies of scale. And that's the problem about construction, is the bigger the project, the more economies of scales that you have.
But you make it sound really easy, but what does it take from or what's required from the users to make use of your Impulse's capabilities?
Yeah, well, we try. Disperse is very much based our platform about trying to be as passive and as less impactful to your team as possible. Like I want zero input. Like I like when my clients call me up. I love having a chat with them. I love hearing about the team, but I really just don't want to talk to you because I want to be able to take that burden away from you and every week getting a strong set of photos, a strong set of data, a strong set of insights that the team can then just absorb into their day-to-day and progress. We have an entire team of solution consultants who are fantastic, and they're human as well. No AI in that element, and they are a constant dialogue if needed. And we will reach out when we see if there is something peculiar issue on a construction site. We will reach out and ask, or we will have those general touch bases. How's everything going? Do you need any support? Because implementation of a change of any type of workflow is also always really difficult. But we're here to be able to help support that implementation as well.
Well, how long does it take to, let's say, become productive on the side with your solution?
Yeah, so we've actually turned around project sites within a day or 2 days, shall I say. We were lucky on the time difference. And that was a project in New York. But typically we like to be able to work well with your team and be able to have enough time to actually embed within your team. So making them aware, like this process is coming up, there's these abilities here. We can start on a project at the very end if need be, or midway, and we can catch up and we can start tracking the progress and give you the numbers of where you are. We can also start where we prefer at the very beginning as the team is being built. And as the team is being assembled, that's actually the best time to be able to work with the team and discuss, like, here's this tool. This is going to save you walking the site, taking photos. It's going to save you having to track all this progress of your trades. It's going to be an additional set of eyes. And once they actually know at the very beginning, we definitely see an improvement in the implementation throughout the project. Okay. And where we've also done in the past is where, just to help teams and just in their muscle memory, so to speak, during superstructure, we'll just take photos. We'll capture the works. We might track a few tasks during the superstructure, but ultimately once fit out kicks in, that's when we'll track everything, all the items against the schedule. But because the team is already familiar with that really small process of just turning the laptop on every morning or every Monday, where's my my weekly set of photos, they're already embedded into that process. Okay. And then once they start seeing all the visual elements, like where trade A, B, and C have been, then they can then start to actually, right, it's just one extra click. Brilliant. There it is. There's the data. That's where we really do see improvements and a really big increase in engagement from our users.
Well, we know that technology evolves exponentially, as we have seen with AI, for example. But what is your vision for the future of the industry and your company?
Yeah, so in terms of the vision of the industry, I definitely feel we're ultimately going to be building more. Cities are getting bigger. Cities are getting taller towers. There is an urban sprawl. So it's more people are living in cities. So it just means more towers. And that then just means it's going to be more difficult to build on these small areas that we've got. If I want to say slightly out of Disperse, I would say 3D printing still hasn't had its heyday yet. I do think that is actually not just building a standard 3-bedroom house, but actually building more components internally. I think that still has an opportunity. It will have an opportunity, especially what we're seeing with rockets and the manufacturing industry. It is definitely that's going to take off. In terms of where Disperse has nailed the tracking of what has happened. Okay, I do feel like that going forward of what's actually happening in the future, that is something that we have explored, and we've got systems where we are able to work. I think that is still the core element of what we need to solve as an industry. I've spoken before that we're tracking what's actually happened, which is then freeing up the team to make more decisions on what to do in the front. What's actually happening next week, which the short-term planning element is one of the elements I think that the industry needs to be able to resolve. Because when I see works being pulled out, because we highlight that as a spotlight, And then I find out a little bit what it is. It's like, yeah, that was just out of sequence. It was out of sequence because you as a team didn't communicate between the two packages. And then that comes from your short-term planning. We talked about TAP planning or essentially lean philosophies like last planning methods. That element, I do feel that is a really strong element to actually boost the industry and where it will go. Where Disperse will go in the future, we're going to very much heavily concentrate on nailing the large site capture and tracking solutions for large-scale construction, because that is where we really do excel at.
Okay. I don't think we have any comments from the audience. Let's see.
That's okay. No doubt. There'll be a few DM messages afterwards.
Yeah, that's good.
That's always good.
Yeah, but in case I'm sure our audience will wants to find more about Disperse, and how can they do that, and how can they connect with you?
Yeah. So feel free to reach out to me at Will Synnott on LinkedIn, or drop to our website disperse.io. More than happy to book a demo and to speak, but also just be consultative. I like to feel like, especially my other sales guy, Owen, we do try to take a consultative approach to this. Not every project is right for us, and maybe you are actually really, really far on your 3D BIM element. That's fine, but we can still support you on your projects that aren't. But ultimately, more than happy to discuss anything in construction technology or just in construction in general.
Very good. Well, I think we could talk for hours with you.
I do talk for hours. So yeah, having a stop time is probably one of the better things to say.
Well, okay. Thanks, Will, for coming on the show, and all the best for your future endeavors.
Yeah, much appreciated, and thank you ever so much for everyone who's listening in. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast and visit aec-business.com, the award-winning blog, for more news and stories.